Now onto the body fur. I'm just hiding the guides. Obviously, this is nowhere near dense enough, and it is really thick. It looks like quills. So wait. It's way too thick. So I'm gonna go to thickness. All right, so for the thickness, let's bring this down even further. And I personally don't like it when the width goes from full to absolutely nothing. I usually do bring this value up just a bit. And of course you can change it so that it's, you know, for eyelashes usually it's not so thick all the way to the ends, but in this case for the body fur, something like that is okay. And I'm gonna add another 0 here. And I'm getting some weird patchy areas, so I'm just going to bring up the influence radius. And you can see it's fixed that area up, and I'm also going to bring down the maximum guide count so that it's not 10 is quite high for it to be blending between. I really only wanted to search for maybe 3 guides per area. And to make things a lot faster, I can also turn off display as subdivision curves. Again, with this body fur, it's not really curly or kinky, so I don't need to see the curves, the hair smooth out, and you'll see it's suddenly a lot faster. And going into the hair itself, oh, actually, one more thing I can show you that will help speed things up is you can turn this from auto update onto manual, and under optimization you could limit to bounding box. I like to turn it to manual before I start translating the bounding box because sometimes it crashes. Save often. I will say that. Okay, so this, and then now if I set this back to auto update, you'll see I'm now only visualizing for just on this area. Okay, now if I go into this node here, kind of similar as the guides, you can just keep adding filters and nodes to create the look that you want. Just know that the nodes that you have at the beginning, the effect will be strongest. So I usually like to add a hair clump node first. If say this node wants the skin, or sorry, and then this input wants the VDB. Okay, you can also add a custom set of guide curves in here, but in this case, I just want to use the guides themselves. Okay, again, like I was saying before, if I add a bunch of nodes, say changing the length, adding wave, stray hairs, and then I add a clump node at the end, it's going to be far less clumpy than if I add it in the beginning. So I'm going to bring down the clump size. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm pressing Y. Okay, there we go. Okay, and the body itself isn't too clumpy, but let me turn this back on. Okay, another thing to know is there's two different ways of clumping. There's extrude and bend and linear bend. Depending on what you're doing, short hair versus long hair, usually one looks a lot better than the other. In this case, I'm okay with it being not too clumpy because it's the body fur. We want it to look like fur, but we don't need it to be super clumpy and wet looking. We want it to look natural, so I'm okay with extrude and bend. Now there's also stray rate, which you can see once I bring this up. Sorry, let me make this more extreme so you can really see the difference between the settings. If I add stray rate, you'll see that the hairs are starting to disappear within the clumps. They're going back and forth between each other. This is really nice to create really natural looking fur. I'm going to set this to 0.5. And we also have a clump profile, so this is where you can adjust it to be maybe really clumpy at the root and not clumpy at the tips. In this case, we're going to leave it. Another thing that really helps with realism is curling. Fractal clumping is also really useful as well. It will make it look a lot more natural. It will clump within a clump, and there's settings that you can use, so it starts to take away from the look where you can really see it clumping per guide. It's helpful. In this case, since we're barely seeing any clump in the body fur, I'm just going to leave this off. But I will add a bit of curling just because this helps just create variation in the hair so it doesn't look too CG. It can be really helpful if you're doing a character to just add a little bit of curling at the root only, just so if the hairs aren't exactly perpendicular to each other. In this case, whoa. So you see, turning it on and off, that's the difference there. I don't want it to be too strong, but just enough to break it up and make it look more like fur. So if I go back to curling, you can see it's starting to look more fur-like.